The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Jessica Eleanor stepped down onto the sun-baked earth of Ruby City, Idaho. Her leather satchel clutched tight against her chest like armor. It was July 1884, and she had traveled 3 weeks from Boston to claim the one thing that would finally make her free. 160 acres of good land under the Homestead Act, land that would be hers and hers alone, purchased with every penny she had saved working as a seamstress in her uncle's shop for the past 6 years. The land office sat at the end of Main Street, a squat wooden building with peeling white paint and windows that desperately needed washing. Jessica squared her shoulders and walked toward it, ignoring the curious stares of miners and merchants who lined the boardwalk. She knew what they saw. A woman alone, 23 years old, with dark auburn hair pinned severely back and a traveling dress that had seen better days. Let them stare. She had not come all this way to worry about propriety. Inside the land office, a clerk with spectacles perched on his bulbous nose looked up from his ledger. "Help you, miss." "I am here to file a claim," Jessica said, setting her papers on the counter with a decisive thud. "The southeast quarter of Section 16, Township 4 North, Range 1 East." The clerk's eyebrows shot up. He shuffled through his own papers, ran his finger down a column, and then cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I am afraid there has been some mistake, miss. That particular plot was claimed this morning." The blood drained from Jessica's face. "That is impossible. I sent a telegram weeks ago stating my intention to file. I was assured that plot was available." "It was available," the clerk said, wincing, "until about 3 hours ago when Fletcher Kane filed on it. Legal and proper, miss. First come, first served." "Fletcher Kane," Jessica repeated, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "Where might I find this Mr. Kane?" "He was heading out to the property to start work, I expect. It is about 8 miles northeast of town, near Sucker Creek." "But miss, there are other plots available." Jessica did not wait to hear the rest. She walked out of that office with her spine straight and her mind churning with fury. Everything she had planned, everything she had sacrificed, and some opportunistic cowboy had swooped in and stolen her land out from under her. She would not stand for it. She would ride out there right now and make him understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The livery stable owner was skeptical about renting a horse to a woman traveling alone, but Jessica's money spoke louder than his concerns. She mounted the bay mare with practiced ease, grateful for the riding lessons her father had insisted upon before his death 10 years prior, and set out on the road the stable owner had grudgingly pointed out. The Idaho landscape in summer was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Sagebrush stretched in every direction, punctuated by rocky outcroppings and the occasional stand of juniper trees. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Jessica was grateful for the wide brimmed hat she had purchased in town. As she rode, her anger began to crystallize into determination. She would not be turned away. She would not go back to Boston empty-handed, back to her uncle's patronizing smiles and the marriage he kept trying to arrange with his business partner's son. She found the property just before sunset, recognizing it from the survey maps she had studied until she could see them in her sleep. Sucker Creek ran along the western boundary, a ribbon of precious water that made the land valuable. There were cottonwood trees near the creek, and the ground looked fertile enough for crops if one worked it properly. In the middle of what should have been her land, a man was setting up a camp. Jessica urged her horse forward, pulling up short when she was close enough to make out his features. Fletcher Kane was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He wore working clothes, denim trousers, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, and worn boots. He looked up at the sound of her approach, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle propped against a nearby tree before relaxing when he saw she was a woman. "Evening," he said, his voice a low drawl that spoke of years spent outdoors. "You lost, madam." "I am not lost," Jessica said, dismounting with perhaps more force than necessary. "I am exactly where I intend to be, on my land." Fletcher's eyes narrowed, and Jessica noticed they were a startling blue-green like the ocean back home. "Your land? I think you are mistaken. I filed on this claim this morning. Got the papers right here." He patted his shirt pocket. "And I had an agreement with the land office that this plot would be held for me," Jessica countered, striding toward him with her fists clenched at her sides. "I traveled 3 weeks to get here. I have the survey maps, the application papers, everything I need. That clerk had no right to give you my land." "Your land?" Fletcher's voice rose slightly, his own temper beginning to show. "I have been saving for 5 years to buy this claim. I have been working ranches from here to Montana, breaking my back to earn enough money. I filed first, legal and proper. The land is mine." They stood facing each other in the fading light, neither willing to back down. Up close, Jessica could see the fine lines around Fletcher's eyes, the calluses on his hands, the way his jaw clenched when he was angry. He was probably around 27 or 28, she guessed, and he looked like he had earned every year through hard work. "How did you even know about this particular plot?" Jessica demanded. "This is too much of a coincidence." Fletcher had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I might have seen your telegram when I was at the land office last week. The clerk was not exactly discreet about it." "You stole my claim." Jessica's voice shook with rage. "You saw that I wanted this land and you deliberately filed on it before I could arrive." "I did not steal anything," Fletcher shot back. "You do not own land just by wanting it. You have to file the claim. I got here first." "That is how the law works." "The law," Jessica said bitterly. "How convenient for you that the law favors whoever happens to have the geographic advantage. I suppose you think that makes it right." "I think it makes it legal," Fletcher said, but his voice had lost some of its heat. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly weary. "Look, I am sorry you came all this way, but I need this land too. I am not giving it up." "Neither am I," Jessica said flatly. "I will go back to the land office tomorrow and contest your claim. I will fight this through every legal channel available." "You do that," Fletcher said, "but you will be wasting your time. The claim is valid." Jessica turned to mount her horse, then paused. The sun was setting fast, and the 8-mile ride back to town in the dark would be foolish, possibly dangerous. She hated to admit it, but she needed to make camp herself. "I will be staying near the creek tonight," she announced. "Since this is legally contested land, I have as much right to be here as you do." Fletcher looked like he wanted to argue, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. But stay on the other side of the creek. I do not want any confusion about whose camp is whose." Jessica led her horse to the creek, found a flat spot on the opposite bank from Fletcher's camp, and began unpacking her bedroll. She had camped before, on the journey west, though never alone. She gathered wood for a fire with quick, efficient movements, very aware of Fletcher watching her from across the water. When her fire was burning steadily, she pulled out the dried beef and hardtack that constituted her supper, and tried not to think about how her entire future had just collapsed. Without this land, what would she do? She could not go back to Boston. She would rather die than crawl back to her uncle's house and admit defeat. But her money was nearly gone, and Ruby City did not look like the kind of place that had much use for a seamstress. "You know how to use that rifle." Fletcher's voice carried across the creek, making her jump. Jessica looked at the Winchester she had purchased in Boise, which was currently lying on her bedroll more for show than anything else. "If I need to," she called back, which was not exactly a lie. She had fired a rifle exactly 3 times in her life, and her aim had been abysmal. Mountain lions sometimes come down to the creek at night, Fletcher said. Keep your fire burning bright. I do not need your advice, Jessica retorted, but she added another log to her fire anyway. She lay awake long into the night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Idaho wilderness and watching the stars wheel overhead. Across the creek, Fletcher's fire burned low, and she could see his silhouette as he sat keeping watch. Despite everything, she felt a grudging respect for him. He was clearly not some city dandy playing at being a homesteader. He knew this land, knew how to survive in it, but that did not mean she was giving up her claim. The next morning, Jessica woke at dawn to find Fletcher already breaking camp. She quickly rolled up her bedroll and saddled her horse, determined to get to the land office before he could pull any more tricks. But when she reached town, she found the office locked with a sign that read, "Gone to boys. Back Thursday." Thursday was 5 days away. Jessica stood on the boardwalk, staring at that sign and fighting the urge to scream. She became aware of someone standing beside her and turned to find Fletcher, his hat in his hands, looking almost apologetic. "Looks like we are both stuck," he said quietly. "This is your fault," Jessica said, but her heart was not in it. She was too tired, too defeated. "Come have breakfast," Fletcher said. "We can talk about this without shouting at each other." Jessica wanted to refuse, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She had not eaten anything but hardtack since yesterday afternoon. "Fine," she said curtly, "but I am not conceding anything." The hotel restaurant was nearly empty at this early hour. Fletcher ordered coffee and eggs for both of them, and Jessica was too hungry to protest. They sat in awkward silence until the food arrived, and then Jessica ate with single-minded focus, barely tasting the eggs. "Tell me something," Fletcher said finally, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "Why this particular plot? There are dozens of claims available around Ruby City." Jessica set down her fork and met his eyes. "The water," she said. "Sucker Creek runs year-round, according to the geological surveys, and the soil composition is right for growing wheat and vegetables. Most of the other available plots are either too rocky or too dry. This land can actually sustain someone." Fletcher nodded slowly. "That is exactly why I want it too." "So what do we do?" Jessica asked. "Stand there shouting at each other until one of us gives up." "I am not giving up," Fletcher said immediately. "Neither am I," Jessica shot back. They glared at each other across the table. Then, unexpectedly, Fletcher laughed. It was a warm, genuine sound that transformed his whole face, and Jessica felt something flutter in her chest that she immediately suppressed. "You are stubborn as a mule," Fletcher said, shaking his head. "I will give you that." "Look who is talking," Jessica retorted, but she felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. Fletcher sobered, studying her thoughtfully. "What is waiting for you back east, if you do not mind me asking?" Jessica hesitated, then decided honesty could not hurt at this point. "Nothing I want. An uncle who thinks a woman is only good for sewing and making a good marriage. A city where I will never be anything but someone's wife or someone's employee. I came west because I wanted to prove I could make my own way, that I could build something that belonged to me." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. "I have been working other people's ranches since I was 15, he said finally. "My father lost our farm in Kansas in the grasshopper plague of '74. He drank himself to death after that, and my mother followed him a year later. I have been drifting ever since, working hard but never getting ahead. This land represents the first real future I have ever had a chance at." Jessica felt her anger softening despite herself. They were not so different, she and this cowboy. Both running from painful pasts, both desperate for a fresh start. There has to be a solution, she said. Some way to resolve this that does not involve the courts. We could split it, Fletcher suggested. 80 acres each. Jessica shook her head. Neither of us could prove up a homestead claim on just 80 acres. The law requires 160 for a reason. We would both fail. Then I do not see what other option there is, Fletcher said, frustrated. Unless one of us withdraws the claim, which I will not do. And neither will I. They finished their breakfast in tense silence. As they left the restaurant, Fletcher turned to her. I am riding back out to the property. I have work to do if I am going to meet the homestead requirements. As do I, Jessica said firmly. So they rode out together, an uneasy truce settling between them. Over the next few days, a strange rhythm developed. They maintained separate camps on opposite sides of the creek, but they worked within sight of each other. Fletcher began constructing a small cabin, hauling logs from the stand of trees upstream and notching them with practiced skill. Jessica, determined not to be outdone, started her own building project, though her structure looked considerably less sturdy. On the third day, Fletcher waded across the creek to where Jessica was struggling to lift a particularly heavy log into place. You are going to hurt yourself, he said bluntly. Here, let me help. Jessica wanted to refuse, but the log was genuinely too heavy for her to manage alone. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Fletcher lifted the log as though it weighed nothing and positioned it where she indicated. He looked at her half-built structure with a critical eye. Your corner joints are not going to hold through the winter, he observed. The whole thing will collapse in the first heavy snow. Then I will rebuild it, Jessica said defiantly. Fletcher sighed. Do you actually know how to build a cabin? I read a book about it. You read a book? Fletcher rubbed his hand over his face. All right, look. I cannot in good conscience watch you build something that is going to fall down and possibly kill you. Let me show you how to do the joints properly. Why would you help me? Jessica asked suspiciously. We are rivals. Because you are going to get yourself hurt out of sheer stubbornness, Fletcher said. And I may want this land, but I do not want your death on my conscience. So Jessica swallowed her pride and let Fletcher teach her. He was patient, she had to admit, showing her multiple times how to notch the logs so they would fit together securely. His hands were deft and sure, and when he stood close to demonstrate a technique, Jessica found herself very aware of his warmth, the smell of pine sap and honest sweat that clung to him. You are a quick learner, Fletcher said that evening as they surveyed the day's work. If you had the right tools and some help, you could actually make a go of this. I will make a go of it regardless, Jessica said, but the words lacked her earlier venom. The truth was, spending days working alongside Fletcher had revealed a different side of him. He was hardworking and fair, quick to laugh at his own mistakes and generous with his knowledge. When he talked about his plans for the land, his whole face lit up with an enthusiasm that was infectious. That night, Fletcher invited her to share his fire and the rabbit he had snared. Jessica accepted, telling herself it was only practical, that there was no sense in them both maintaining separate camps when they were working toward the same goal, even if that goal meant defeating each other. Tell me about Boston, Fletcher said as they ate. What was it like growing up there? Jessica found herself talking about her childhood, about her father who had been a professor of literature, and her mother who had died when Jessica was 12. She talked about the books she had read, the dreams she had harbored of going to college herself before her father's death had ended those hopes. Fletcher listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. In return, he told her stories of his years on the trail, of cattle drives and blizzards and the time he had to face down a grizzly bear with nothing but a broken fence post. You are making that up, Jessica said, laughing. "I swear on my mother's grave," Fletcher insisted, his eyes dancing with mirth. "That bear took one look at me yelling and waving that post around like a madman and decided I was more trouble than I was worth. Or it was not actually going to attack you in the first place," Jessica suggested. "Let me have my story," Fletcher protested. "It is all I have got." As the fire burned low, their conversation turned more serious. Fletcher told her about the farm in Kansas, about watching his father spiral into despair and his mother waste away from grief. Jessica shared the pain of her uncle's constant disappointment in her, the way he had made it clear that her education and ambitions were unnatural for a woman. "He told me I should be grateful he took me in at all," Jessica said quietly. "That I was a burden, and the least I could do was make myself useful." "He is a fool," Fletcher said with sudden intensity. "Anyone can see you are smart and capable. You crossed half the country alone to claim land. That takes more courage than most men I know have got." Jessica felt heat rising to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you," she said softly. Their eyes met across the flames and something passed between them, something Jessica did not want to name. She stood abruptly. "I should get some sleep. Thank you for dinner." "Jessica," Fletcher said, and the sound of her given name in his low voice made her pause. "We will figure this out. Somehow." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and retreated to her own bedroll on the other side of the creek. Thursday arrived, and they rode into Ruby City together to meet with the land office clerk. The conversation did not go well. The clerk, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, confirmed that Fletcher's claim was legally valid as he had filed first, but Jessica's telegram did establish her prior interest in the property. "This is irregular," the clerk admitted, shuffling papers nervously. "Normally, we would not have a conflict like this. Mr. Kane, would you be willing to withdraw your claim and file on a different plot?" "No," Fletcher said firmly. "Miss Eleanor." "Absolutely not," Jessica said. The clerk sighed. "Then I am afraid this will have to go before the Territorial Land Board. They meet in Boise next month. Until then, neither of you should take any permanent actions on the property." "But the homestead requirements," Jessica protested. "We have to show improvement within 6 months." "Then you had better hope the board makes a quick decision," the clerk said unhelpfully. Back at the property, Jessica and Fletcher stood by the creek, the enormity of the situation settling over them. An entire month of uncertainty, and even then, no guarantee of resolution. "We could keep working," Fletcher suggested. "Build up the improvements. Whoever wins will have a head start on proving up the claim. And whoever loses will have wasted weeks of labor," Jessica pointed out. "You have a better idea," she did not. So they kept working, through the hot July days and into August. They fell into an easy partnership, though neither acknowledged it as such. Fletcher helped Jessica finish her cabin, and in return she helped him clear land for planting. They shared meals and stories, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wall between them began to crumble. Jessica found herself watching Fletcher when he did not notice, admiring the easy grace with which he moved, the kindness in his eyes when he helped her with a difficult task. She noticed the way he always made sure she had enough to eat, the way he positioned his camp between hers and the wilderness as a subtle protection. Fletcher, for his part, was captivated by Jessica's fierce determination and sharp intelligence. She could discuss literature and philosophy one moment and then analyze crop rotation strategies the next. She never complained about the hard work, and she faced each challenge with a stubbornness that both frustrated and impressed him. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled in fast and violent. Jessica's smaller cabin was not yet weatherproof, and rain poured through gaps in the roof. Fletcher appeared at her door, water streaming off his hat. "Get your things," he shouted over the thunder. "You will drown in here." Jessica grabbed her bedroll and satchel and followed him through the downpour to his larger, sturdier cabin. Inside, Fletcher had a fire going, and the roof was solid overhead. They stood dripping on the floor, suddenly very aware that they were alone together in close quarters. "Thank you," Jessica said, pushing wet hair out of her face. "I should have noticed those gaps." "The storm came up fast," Fletcher said. He handed her a blanket. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." Jessica hesitated, and Fletcher immediately turned his back. "I will not look," he promised. Jessica quickly changed into her spare dress, which was mercifully dry from being in her satchel. "You can turn around now." Fletcher had changed into dry clothes as well. The cabin was small, and they were acutely aware of each other's presence. The storm raged outside, and inside, the air felt charged with something that had nothing to do with lightning. "Tell me something true," Fletcher said suddenly. "Something you have not told anyone else." Jessica considered the question, sitting down on the rough-hewn bench Fletcher had built. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Not of losing the land claim, though that scares me too, but of being alone for the rest of my life, of never mattering to anyone." Fletcher sat down beside her, close but not touching. "You matter," he said quietly. "You have made these past weeks the best I can remember in a long time." "Fletcher," Jessica began, but she did not know how to finish the sentence. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know we are fighting over the same land. But Jessica, somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my rival. I started seeing you as the woman I look for first thing every morning. The person I want to share every small victory with. The one I think about when I should be thinking about anything else." Jessica's heart hammered in her chest. "We cannot," she whispered. "We are still fighting over the same land." "Then maybe we should stop fighting," Fletcher said. His thumb traced along her jawline. "Maybe there is another solution we have not considered." "What solution?" Jessica asked, but she already knew. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. "We could work this land together," Fletcher said. "As partners, as husband and wife." Jessica should have pulled away. She should have reminded him that she came west to be independent, not to tie herself to another man. But when Fletcher leaned in and kissed her, soft and questioning, she found herself kissing him back. It was not like the fumbling kisses she had endured from her uncle's business associate's son back in Boston. This was fire and tenderness all at once, Fletcher's hand cupping her face like she was something precious, his lips moving against hers with a certainty that made her knees weak. She gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, and felt his sharp intake of breath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "We will file a joint claim, work this land together, build a real home, a real life." "I barely know you," Jessica protested weakly. "You know I will work myself to the bone to make this land prosper," Fletcher said. "You know I will never try to make you into something you are not. You know that when I give my word, I keep it. And you know that I am falling in love with you, Jessica Eleanor, whether it makes sense or not." Tears pricked Jessica's eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "But Fletcher, I need to know that you see me as an equal. Not just a helper or a wife, but a true partner in this venture." Fletcher pulled back to look her in the eyes. "I have watched you work this land for weeks now. I have seen your mind work through problems, your determination to succeed. Jessica, I would be a fool not to treat you as an equal. Truth be told, you are probably smarter than me about half these things anyway." Jessica laughed through her tears. "Only half. I am trying to maintain some pride here," Fletcher said with a grin. Then he sobered. I mean it, Jessica. Equal partners in everything. We make decisions together. We work together. We build this future together. Your dreams matter just as much as mine. Jessica thought about the alternative, going before the land board alone, fighting Fletcher in a legal battle that could leave them both with nothing. She thought about going back to Boston defeated, or trying to make it in Ruby City without land or resources. But mostly, she thought about the past weeks working alongside Fletcher, the easy way they had fallen into rhythm with each other, the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Fletcher kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms wrapping around her and pulling her close. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, Jessica felt safe and certain for the first time since leaving Boston. They spent that night talking, making plans, dreaming out loud about what they would build together. Fletcher promised to teach Jessica everything he knew about ranching and livestock. Jessica shared her ideas about crops and irrigation. They talked about the cabin they would build together, bigger than either of the structures they had started, with room for a family someday. I want children, Fletcher said. If you do. I do, Jessica said, though I am terrified of childbirth. My mother died that way. Fletcher squeezed her hand. We will make sure you have the best care available when the time comes. I promise. When dawn broke clear and cool, they rode into Ruby City and found the circuit judge who traveled through once a month. Judge Morrison was a grizzled old man with kind eyes who had seen plenty of unusual situations in his years on the bench. So let me understand this, he said, leaning back in his chair. You two have been fighting over the same land claim for weeks, and now you want to get married. Yes, sir, Fletcher said, his hand firmly holding Jessica's. We want to file a joint homestead claim as husband and wife. Judge Morrison looked at Jessica. Miss, are you entering into this marriage of your own free will, no coercion? None whatsoever, Jessica said firmly. This is my choice. The judge studied them both for a long moment, then smiled. Well, I have seen stranger things lead to happy marriages. If you are both sure about this, I can marry you right now and file the amended claim paperwork myself when I go to Boys next week. Right now, Jessica said, suddenly nervous. Fletcher turned to her. We do not have to rush if you are not ready. We could wait, have a proper ceremony. Jessica thought about waiting, about the uncertainty that would hang over them. Then she looked at Fletcher, at the man who had somehow become essential to her in just a few short weeks, and knew she did not want to wait. No, she said. Let us do it now. They were married in Judge Morrison's office with the land office clerk and the hotel keeper as witnesses. Jessica wore her traveling dress and Fletcher his clean shirt. And when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed her with such tenderness that the hotel keeper wiped away tears. After the ceremony, they went to the general store and Fletcher bought Jessica a simple gold band. I will get you a better one someday, he promised as he slipped it on her finger. This one is perfect, Jessica said, meaning it. It represented something real and hard-won, not some fancy trinket bought to impress. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, and Jessica discovered that the passion she had felt when Fletcher kissed her was only the beginning. He was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When he made love to her for the first time, Jessica understood what it meant to truly give yourself to another person, to trust them with every vulnerable part of yourself. Afterward, lying in Fletcher's arms, Jessica felt a peace she had never known. I was so angry when I first saw you on that land, she said, tracing patterns on his chest. I know, Fletcher said with a quiet laugh. You looked like you wanted to shoot me. Part of me did, Jessica admitted. I thought you had stolen my dream. And now. Now I think maybe we were both meant to find that land so we could find each other, Jessica said. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. Is that foolish? No, Fletcher said, pulling her down for a kiss. I think it is exactly right. They returned to the property as husband and wife, and the land that had been a source of conflict became a shared project, something they built together. Fletcher's larger cabin became their home, and they worked to improve it, adding a proper floor and windows that Fletcher hauled from Ruby City. Jessica proved to have a talent for planning and organization. She drew up detailed schedules for their work, figuring out the most efficient ways to accomplish their homesteading requirements. Fletcher brought practical skills and knowledge of the land. Together, they were formidable. By September, they had cleared 10 acres for planting, built a sturdy barn, and even started a small vegetable garden that Jessica tended with fierce devotion. They worked from dawn until dusk, then fell into bed exhausted but satisfied. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sun set over their land, Fletcher said, "I got a letter from Judge Morrison today. The land board approved our joint claim. The land is officially ours." Jessica felt tears of relief and joy spill down her cheeks. "It is real, then. This is really our home." "Our home," Fletcher repeated, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Though we still have 3 more years of proving up before we get the deed, we cannot slack off now." "When have you ever known me to slack off?" Jessica said, elbowing him gently. "Fair point," Fletcher conceded with a grin. As fall turned to winter, they learned to work together through challenges. When an early snowstorm threatened their livestock, they worked through the night to secure the animals. When Jessica came down with a fever, Fletcher nursed her with gentle care, barely leaving her side until she recovered. When Fletcher broke his arm in a fall, Jessica took over the heavy work without complaint, proving she was every bit as capable as he had believed. They had fights, of course. Jessica's stubbornness clashed with Fletcher's occasionally, especially when they disagreed about how to handle a particular problem. But they learned to talk through their disagreements, to really listen to each other's perspectives. "You are the most maddening woman I have ever met," Fletcher said one day after a particularly heated argument about whether to invest in more cattle or focus on crops. "And you are impossibly stubborn," Jessica shot back. They glared at each other for a moment, then both started laughing. "We are quite a pair," Fletcher said, pulling her into his arms. "We really are," Jessica agreed, kissing him. They compromised on the cattle question, deciding to get a small herd and also expand the planted acreage. It turned out to be the right decision, diversifying their resources. Winter in Idaho was harsh, but their cabin was snug and well built. They spent long evenings by the fire, Jessica reading aloud from the books she had brought from Boston while Fletcher carved small wooden figures. He made her a set of birds, each one remarkably detailed, and Jessica treasured them. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked, marveling at a tiny hawk he had just finished. "My father taught me before things went bad," Fletcher said quietly. "It is one of the few good memories I have of him." Jessica squeezed his hand, understanding the weight of that statement. They had both carried so much pain from their pasts, but together they were building something new and whole. In February, Jessica realized she was pregnant. She sat with the knowledge for several days, terrified and thrilled in equal measure before telling Fletcher. When she finally worked up the courage, she waited until they were having supper. "Fletcher, I need to tell you something," she said, her hands shaking slightly. He looked up immediately, concern crossing his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Jessica said quickly. "At least, I do not think so. I am pregnant." Fletcher's face went through a series of expressions, shock, joy, fear, then settling on a fierce protectiveness. He came around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Are you all right? How are you feeling?" "We need to get you to a doctor," he said, all in a rush. "I am fine," Jessica said, laughing through sudden tears. "Tired and a bit queasy in the mornings, but fine. Fletcher, we are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," Fletcher repeated wonderingly. Then he kissed her, gentle and reverent. "I am going to take such good care of you, both of you." Fletcher was true to his word. He insisted Jessica reduce her workload, taking on more of the heavy tasks himself. He rode into Ruby City and came back with medical books and supplies. He made her rest even when she protested that she felt fine. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Jessica complained when Fletcher tried to prevent her from helping with the spring planting. "I know," Fletcher said patiently, "but humor me. I cannot lose you, Jessica. You and this baby mean everything to me." His vulnerability melted her frustration. She knew he was thinking about his mother, about the many women who did not survive childbirth. "You are not going to lose me," she said firmly. "I am too stubborn to die, remember." As her pregnancy progressed, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Fletcher built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving tiny flowers along the edges. Jessica sewed baby clothes from the soft fabric Fletcher had bought in town, her stitches neat and precise. In early October, Jessica went into labor. Fletcher rode like hell to fetch the midwife from Ruby City, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Fletcher, pacing outside the cabin, was certain he was going to lose his mind from worry. But Jessica was strong, and Mrs. Chen was skilled, and just before dawn, the cry of a newborn baby split the air. Fletcher burst into the cabin to find his wife exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. "It is a boy," Jessica said softly. "Fletcher, we have a son." Fletcher approached almost shyly, looking down at the red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already waving tiny fists in the air, clearly displeased about being born. "He has your stubbornness," Fletcher said, his voice choked with emotion. "Look at him, already fighting." "What should we name him?" Jessica asked. They had discussed names, but standing there looking at their son, Fletcher knew exactly what felt right. "What about William, after your father?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "William Kane. Yes, that is perfect." Fletcher carefully took his son in his arms, marveling at how small and perfect he was. "Hello, William," he said softly. "I am your father, and I promise I am going to do better by you than mine did by me. You are going to grow up knowing you are loved and wanted." The baby made a small sound, and Fletcher felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. William was a demanding infant, crying lustily when he was hungry or wet or just wanted attention. Jessica nursed him while Fletcher did the chores, then Fletcher would take the baby so Jessica could rest. "I had no idea it would be this hard," Jessica said one night when William had finally fallen asleep after hours of crying. "We will get through it," Fletcher said, rubbing her shoulders. "We make a good team, remember." And they did get through it. As William grew from a newborn to an infant to a chubby, laughing baby, they adapted. Jessica learned to work with William strapped to her back in a sling the way she had seen native women do. Fletcher became expert at soothing the baby to sleep with his low, singing voice. The homestead continued to prosper. Their first wheat crop yielded better than expected, and the small cattle herd Fletcher had started grew healthily. They were not rich by any means, but they were building something solid and sustainable. When William was 6 months old, they had visitors, a couple who had filed a claim on the adjacent property. The Harrises were from Ohio, about Fletcher and Jessica's age, and they quickly became friends. It was a relief to have neighbors, people who understood the challenges of homesteading. "I do not know how you manage it," Mrs. Harris said to Jessica one day as they worked together on a quilting project. "Homesteading with a baby. I can barely keep up, and it is just my husband and me." "I have a good partner," Jessica said, glancing over to where Fletcher and Mr. Harris were mending fence while Fletcher wore William in the sling, the baby babbling happily. "We share everything equally. The work, the decisions, the care of William. I could not do it alone." "You are lucky," Mrs. Harris said. "My husband thinks child care is women's work." Jessica felt a surge of gratitude for Fletcher, who had never once acted as though taking care of their son was beneath him. He changed diapers and walked the floor with a colicky baby and sang lullabies without complaint. That night, after William was asleep, Jessica told Fletcher what Mrs. Harris had said. "I want you to know how much I appreciate you," she said. "You are an equal partner in every sense, just like you promised." Fletcher pulled her into his arms. "We are in this together," he said simply. "Besides, I like taking care of William. He is ours, Jessica, the family we made together." 3 years after they had first filed their joint claim, they received the deed to their land. Fletcher Kane and Jessica Kane, it read, legal owners of 160 acres. Jessica ran her fingers over the paper, hardly believing it was real. "We did it," she whispered. "We did it," Fletcher confirmed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "This is really ours now. No one can take it away." They celebrated by having the Harrises over for dinner, and Jessica made a special cake with the precious sugar Fletcher had bought in town. William, now a sturdy toddler with his father's blue-green eyes and his mother's determination, helped Fletcher set the table, which mostly involved moving things around randomly and looking pleased with himself. "To the Kanes," Mr. Harris toasted. "May your land prosper and your family grow." "To the future," Fletcher added, his eyes on Jessica. That future included another baby, a daughter they named Sarah, who was born 2 years after William. Sarah was quieter than her brother had been, with auburn hair like her mother and a thoughtful, observant nature. William was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. "Gentle," Jessica reminded him for the 100th time as William tried to pet Sarah's head like she was a puppy. "She is so small," William said wonderingly. "Was I that small?" "Even smaller," Fletcher told him, ruffling his son's hair. "And you cried twice as much." Jessica watched her husband with their children and felt overwhelmed with love. This was so far from the life she had imagined for herself in Boston, alone and independent. It was better. It was richer and fuller and more challenging than anything she could have planned. As the years passed, the homestead grew and changed. They expanded the house, adding rooms for the children and a proper kitchen for Jessica. They built up their herd and became known for producing quality cattle. Jessica started a small business selling eggs and vegetables in Ruby City, her organizational skills making it profitable. Fletcher proved to have a talent for horse training, and he started working with some of the wild mustangs that roamed the territory. He would gentle them with patience and skill, then sell them to ranchers and farmers who needed good working horses. William grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved learning. Jessica taught him to read and write, using the books she had brought from Boston and new ones Fletcher bought whenever he went to Boys. Sarah was more interested in the land itself, following her father around and asking endless questions about the animals and plants. When William was 7 and Sarah was 5, Jessica discovered she was pregnant again. She was 32 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Fletcher worried constantly, but Jessica remained stubbornly optimistic. "I have done this twice before," she reminded him. "I know what I am doing." This time they had twin boys. The labor was brutal, and there were frightening moments when even Mrs. Chen looked worried. But Jessica fought through it with the same determination that had brought her across the country years before. The babies were small but healthy, with strong lungs that they used frequently. "James and Henry," Jessica said, looking at her newborn sons. "After your brothers." Fletcher, who had lost 2 younger brothers in childhood to illness, felt tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Jessica, thank you." Managing 4 children while running a homestead was chaos, but somehow they made it work. William and Sarah helped with the babies, and the Harrises and other neighbors pitched in. The community around Ruby City had grown, and they took care of each other. One evening, when the twins were about 6 months old, Fletcher and Jessica managed to steal a few moments alone on the porch while the children slept. "You ever miss Boston?" Fletcher asked, his arm around her shoulders. Jessica thought about it seriously. "Sometimes I miss the libraries and the theaters. But no, I do not miss my old life. This is where I belong. Even though it means endless work and worry," Fletcher pressed. "Even though," Jessica confirmed. "Fletcher, when I came here, I thought I wanted to be independent and self-sufficient. What I really wanted was to matter, to build something meaningful, and I have done that with you." Fletcher kissed her temple. "When I saw your telegram about this land, I was not trying to steal it from you. I just saw that someone else recognized what I had seen, the potential here. In some stupid way, I thought if I filed first, maybe I could meet you, convince you to stay in the area." Jessica pulled back to stare at him. "You never told me that." "I was embarrassed," Fletcher admitted. "It sounds foolish. But Jessica, from the moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach, dust-covered and determined, I was fascinated by you. I told myself it was about the land, but somewhere deep down, I think I was already halfway in love." "You were not the only one," Jessica said softly. "I was so angry at you, but I could not stop noticing you. The way you moved, the kindness in your eyes. When you taught me how to build properly instead of letting me fail, I started to see who you really were." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over their land. In the distance, they could hear coyotes calling, and closer by, the gentle sounds of their livestock settling for the night. "We should have more moments like this," Fletcher said. "Just us, remembering why we are doing all this." "We should," Jessica agreed. "Though with 4 children, quiet moments are hard to come by." "We will make them," Fletcher promised. And they did. As the children grew, Fletcher and Jessica made it a point to protect their relationship, to keep the love alive that had started so unexpectedly. They still had arguments, still faced challenges that tested them, but they faced them together. When William was 15, he asked to go to the new school that had opened in Boise. It was a wrenching decision, but Jessica and Fletcher agreed that their son deserved the education he craved. They arranged for him to board with a family friend during the school term, coming home in summers. Sarah, at 13, had no interest in leaving the homestead. She had inherited both her father's way with animals and her mother's business sense, and she was already talking about expanding their horse training operation. The twins, James and Henry, were 9 years old and inseparable. They got into every kind of mischief imaginable, but they were good boys at heart, quick to help and eager to learn. One night, after a particularly long day, Jessica and Fletcher were alone in their room. She was brushing out her hair, now streaked with gray, and Fletcher was pulling off his boots, moving a bit more slowly than he used to. They were both in their early 40s now, showing the wear of years of hard work. "We are getting old," Jessica observed, catching sight of herself in the small mirror Fletcher had bought her. "Speak for yourself," Fletcher said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am just getting started." Jessica laughed and leaned back against him. Do you have any regrets about how we started, about this life? Fletcher thought about it seriously. The only thing I regret is that I did not meet you sooner. We could have had more time. We have time, Jessica said. Years and years still ahead of us. Then we had better make them count, Fletcher said, turning her around and kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding night years ago. Life continued its rhythms. Seasons turned, children grew, the land prospered and occasionally challenged them with drought or harsh winters. Through it all, Fletcher and Jessica remained partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other's dreams, building a legacy that was more than just land. When William graduated from school in Boise and announced he wanted to become a teacher, they were proud. When Sarah married a young rancher from the next county and stayed to work the Kane land with him, they were grateful. When the twins declared they wanted to expand into sheep farming, Jessica and Fletcher helped them get started, even though it meant building additional structures and learning a new trade. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took Jessica to Boise for a week, their first time away from the homestead together since it had all begun. They stayed in a real hotel with running water and electricity, luxuries that Idaho had slowly acquired over the years. "This is lovely," Jessica said, but by the third day she was restless. "I miss home." "I know," Fletcher said, "but we are not leaving yet. We deserve this time together." They went to a theater performance, something Jessica had not seen since leaving Boston. They ate at restaurants where other people did the cooking. They walked through the city holding hands like young lovers, though they were both well into middle age now. On their last night in Boise, Fletcher presented Jessica with a velvet box. Inside was a beautiful gold ring set with a small diamond, far finer than the simple band he had bought her 20 years ago. "Fletcher, this must have cost a fortune," Jessica protested. "We can afford it now," Fletcher said, "and you deserve something beautiful. You have worked so hard, given me so much. Let me give you this." Jessica let him slide the ring onto her finger alongside the original band. "I am not giving up the first one," she said. "I would not want you to," Fletcher assured her. "They are both part of our story." They returned home to find the homestead running smoothly under Sarah and her husband's management. The twins had actually managed not to burn anything down. William had written a long letter about his first teaching position at a school in Idaho City. "Our children are doing well," Jessica said with satisfaction. "We raised them right." "We did," Fletcher agreed. "They are good people, kind and hardworking." Over the next several years, grandchildren arrived. Sarah had 3 daughters in quick succession, and William eventually married a fellow teacher and had 2 sons. The twins both married and started families of their own. The Kane homestead became a gathering place for the growing family, with Fletcher and Jessica at the center of it all. Jessica taught her granddaughters to read and sew, passing on skills and knowledge. Fletcher taught his grandsons to ride and rope, to read the weather and the land. They told stories about the early days, about coming to Idaho and fighting over the same land claim, about building something from nothing. "You two are legends," Sarah told them one Thanksgiving when 3 generations were gathered around the table. "The story of how you met, how you fought and then fell in love. Your grandchildren are going to tell their grandchildren about you." "We are just people who worked hard and got lucky," Jessica protested. "You are more than that," William said seriously. "You showed us what partnership really means, what it means to build a life together based on respect and love." Fletcher reached for Jessica's hand under the table, squeezing it gently. They shared a look that communicated everything they had been through together, everything they had built. As they moved into their 60s, they gradually turned over more of the homestead operations to the younger generation. Fletcher still trained horses, but left the heavy ranch work to their sons-in-law and the twins. Jessica still kept the accounts and made business decisions, but Sarah handled most of the day-to-day management. They spent more time together, taking slow walks around the property, sitting by Sucker Creek and remembering. The land had changed so much since that first summer when they had camped on opposite sides of the creek, glaring at each other with stubborn determination. "Can you imagine if one of us had given up?" Jessica mused one evening. "If you had withdrawn your claim or I had gone back to Boston." "I cannot imagine my life without you," Fletcher said simply. "You are woven into every part of me, Jessica. Have been since the day you rode up on that horse looking like you wanted to shoot me." "I did want to shoot you," Jessica said, laughing. "You were so infuriating, so sure you had the right to my land." "Our land," Fletcher corrected. "It was always meant to be ours. We just did not know it yet." They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends. The celebration was held at the homestead, with long tables set up under the cottonwood trees by the creek. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Jessica wore a new dress that Sarah had made for her, and Fletcher wore his best suit, the one he saved for important occasions. Speech. Someone called out and the crowd took up the chant. Fletcher stood, pulling Jessica up with him. 30 years ago, I married the most stubborn, brilliant, beautiful woman I had ever met. She has challenged me, supported me, loved me through everything life has thrown at us. This land, this family, this life we have built is because we did it together. Jessica, I love you more today than I did when we stood before Judge Morrison in his office all those years ago." Jessica felt tears streaming down her face. "Fletcher Kane, you stole my land claim and stole my heart. You gave me a partnership I never knew I needed, and a love I never thought I would find. These 30 years have been the greatest adventure of my life, and I would not change a single moment of it." They kissed to thunderous applause and cheers, and then the music started up again. Fletcher took Jessica's hand and led her into a dance, moving slowly under the stars, in the same spot where they had once maintained separate camps and pretended not to notice each other. The years continued to pass gently. Fletcher and Jessica moved into their 70s in good health, still sharp-minded and active. They watched their grandchildren grow and start having children of their own. The Kane homestead became a landmark in the region, known for its quality livestock and the enduring partnership of the couple who had founded it. On a warm July evening in 1924, exactly 40 years after Jessica had first stepped off the stagecoach in Ruby City, she and Fletcher sat on the porch of their home. They were both white-haired now, lined and weathered by years of sun and wind, but their eyes were still bright, their love still strong. 40 years, Jessica said wonderingly. "Where did the time go? Into every board of this house," Fletcher said, gesturing at the homestead around them. "Into every child and grandchild. Into this land we fought over and learned to love together." "You think we did well?" Jessica asked. "With our lives, our family," Fletcher looked at her seriously. "Jessica, we turned a conflict into a partnership, built a prosperous homestead, raised 4 good children who have given us a dozen grandchildren and counting. We created something that will last long after we are gone. I would say we did better than well." Jessica smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad I did not shoot you that first day." "So am I," Fletcher said, laughing, "though there were moments when I thought you might." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sun set over their land. In the distance, they could see their grandsons working with the horses, hear their granddaughters' laughter from the garden. The homestead was alive with family, with love, with the legacy they had built together. "I love you, Fletcher Kane," Jessica said softly. "Thank you for fighting me for this land." "I love you," Jessica Kane, Fletcher replied. Thank you for being stubborn enough not to give up. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, two people who had found each other through conflict and built a love that would endure. The land stretched out around them, the land they had claimed together, the land that had brought them together. It was more than property now. It was home, family, legacy. It was the physical manifestation of their love story, built 1 acre at a time, one decision at a time, one shared dream at a time. And it was just the beginning of a legacy that would continue for generations. The story of the woman who came to file a land claim and the cowboy who had already filed on the same plot, and how they turned that conflict into the greatest love either of them had ever known.